Hi, spooky friends and witches. I wanted to pop in and say hi really quick to everyone and let you know that we are going to be sharing some spooky campfire tales from our archive this week. There's no better time for a scary story than when you're out in the woods. We hope you enjoy, and don't forget to share some of your own stories with us by sending us an email at somethingscary@snarled.com. Sweet screams, and I'll see you soon.
Hello, my dark darlings. I'm Markia, and this is the Something Scary podcast. To our veteran listeners and those just voyaging into the dark with us for the first time, welcome. Summer is a time for vacation and relaxation. The weather brings trips to the beach, summer camp, and oasis of sun and play. But this kind of heat this summer can make some people go crazy. And it's the kind of heat that can summon the devil. First, summer camp nightmare, followed by a desperate plea from the dead. Then, hide and seek gone devastatingly wrong. Finally, in our featured story, theater turns from drama to tragedy in one night. I receive hundreds of creepy story submissions every single week, and of those, the scariest ones make it into our podcast, along with the story that we've chosen to animate and post over at youtube.com/snarled. If you have a tale you're dying to share, send me an email at somethingscary@snarled.com. So, want to hear something scary? Summertime slaughter. Summer camp is a treasured memory for many, but not everyone feels so fondly. In fact, for some, camp can be an utter nightmare, like in this story inspired by Leafy and Axel. 12-year-old Eliza was having a miserable time at Camp Conakry. Unathletic, awkward, quiet. She was homesick and friendless in the Pennsylvania woods. Most of the other kids avoided her, as she was uninterested in hiking, swimming, or any of the other regular rituals. To make matters even worse, she had a top bunk, despite a fear of heights, and every morning she very carefully scaled down her bunk to leave the cabin, much to the everlasting amusement of the rest of her cabin mates. She hated everything about camp, until the annual Conakry dance party. That night, she put on her best purple dress and tentatively made her way to the auditorium. She loved dressing up, and purple was her favorite color. A boy named Amos waved to her. "Hey, you're the girl who always wears purple. I love your dress," he said. They chatted through the whole dance. At that moment, just chatting with another kind soul, she felt the misery of the past few weeks lift. They said goodbye, and Eliza was elated. But that would be short-lived. Eliza's bunkmate, Chloe, intended to play a joke on Eliza. The girls in the cabin had been teasing the miserable girl for weeks, and by herself, Chloe had been planning a very particular prank. Late that night, as Eliza slept, Chloe changed the cabin alarm clock to 4 a.m., set it to full volume, and placed it next to Eliza's head. She could barely contain her laughter, imagining Eliza sprinting out of bed into the middle of the still dark woods. Chloe stayed awake all night, waiting for the alarm. At 4 a.m., the alarm blasted into Eliza's ears. Eliza jolted upright, and in her haste, she forgot that she was on a top bunk. Catapulting from the bed, she fell straight down, her head slamming hard against the dresser and twisting her neck at a horrible angle, then falling further as her head then hit the floor with a resounding crack. The other campers stared in horror as blood streamed across the floor, her eyes wide open and devoid of life. The counselors, and later the police, questioned the girls in the cabin about this horrible accident, and again about that alarm clock in Eliza's bed. Chloe kept quiet about it, so no one knew who had played the prank, inadvertently killing Eliza. So along with everyone else, Chloe ended up being cleared of blame. That night, Relieved, she slept soundly. But when she dreamed, it was eerie and vividly realistic. In her dream, Chloe was alone in the cabin and it was time for breakfast. She got up and went to push the creaky screen door, but it wouldn't budge. She tried again, but it was no use. Just then, she heard a soft laugh. She turned around, and standing across from her was Eliza. In her best purple dress, eyes vacant and rolling in her skull, bleeding from the back of her head. She stood there, cradling the cabin alarm clock. Chloe yelled at her to go away. Fumbling at the door, Chloe slid to the ground as Eliza loomed over her. She muttered a terrified apology, pleading with her that it was all a joke. She didn't mean for her to get hurt. Instead, Eliza put the alarm against Chloe's head and let it ring over and over, louder and louder. That morning, the other campers were horrified to find Chloe in bed, the alarm clock ringing loudly next to her head. But instead of waking up, she lay still and silent. When they got closer, they saw blood streaming out of her ears. She never woke up again. To this day, the kids at Camp Conaquee tell the story of Eliza and Chloe. Occasionally, when they dream, they see a girl in a purple dress, holding an alarm clock and walking towards them. No alarm clocks are allowed in the cabins at that camp anymore, just in case Eliza decides to kill again. Thank you so much, Leafy and Axel, for inspiring this summer camp of horror. Listener, what are your scary memories from summer camp? Did you see any ghosts, conjure spirits, or maybe hold a seance? If this happened at your summer camp, would you dare go back? Grief and longing are two of the most powerful emotions we experience. Managed well, they can motivate and heal, but they can also drive us to acts beyond our imagination. Like in this story, inspired by Haven. Dustin was grieving. He had just lost his father and couldn't be consoled by his mother, Char, or sister, Harper. Going through their father's materials, they discovered that he had secretly purchased a cabin. Dustin's mom figured that spending some time there might be a good way to remember him and process their grief. So they made the trek to the cabin, deep in the woods outside Portland. The cabin was disheveled. Books were strewn across the floor. The windows were open and a cold breeze was blowing through. As they unpacked, their mom handed out walkie-talkies in case anyone got lost or separated. Dustin turned his on and adjusted it to get rid of the static and crackling. But instead of a clear signal, the static morphed into a strange voice. He slowly turned it up. The person was whispering in a language that sounded ancient, but the voice sounded so familiar. "Let's go for a walk," his mother suggested. Dustin turned off the walkie-talkie and put it in his backpack. They were walking for what felt like hours, and Dustin was exhausted. He told his mother and sister to continue on and he'd catch up. Alone, he turned on the walkie-talkie again to hear the same strange voice, still whispering. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw him. It was his father, standing in the middle of the woods, as healthy as he'd ever remembered him. Dustin was too shocked to respond. His father smiled and beckoned him to follow. Dustin desperately missed him and was eager to oblige when he heard his mother calling for him. Dustin glanced in the direction of his mother's voice, and when he looked back, His father had disappeared. That night, they built a fire outside the cabin, helping it along with a bit of lighter fluid. They shared stories about their dad. Dustin remembered how much he had enjoyed his dad's grilling. Harper mused about how bad he was at shaving, and Char was more reserved. She mentioned that before he got sick, they were growing apart, and she felt so guilty, wished that she could make amends. Suddenly, the walkie-talkie turned itself on, and the voice returned. Now, they could all hear it. Where was it coming from? They turned back towards the fire and gasped. Their father was sitting across from them on the other side of the fire.
"It's so good to see you again,"
he said. Harper and Dustin screamed and ran into the cabin. They looked out to see their mother standing with their father. What was she doing? She didn't seem scared. She was conferring with him. Their father turned to the cabin.
"When I learned that I was terminal, I began looking for a way to be with you, my family, forever.
He yelled to Harper and Dustin.
All I want is to be a family again. I loved watching you grow up. You are my life, just like you would say I was yours when you were younger."
Dustin was conflicted. He wanted his dad back, but not like this. Harper picked up a dark and dusty, leather-bound book from the floor. Strange markings adorned the cover and the musty pages inside, and suddenly understood. She gasped. Their father had been using the cabin to study the occult. "It will be okay," their mom said, a contented yet creepy smile coming over her face. "We must do whatever we can to be together again." Their parents came close together and turned and walked towards the cabin.
"You buried my body, but my soul is tied to this land,"
their dad said.
"We can always be together, here."
Dustin and Harper yelled at their father to stay away and not to come near the cabin. As they pleaded with him, they didn't notice that Char had pulled out the full spare gasoline can that was usually in the back of the car. She began to douse the cabin while the kids were distracted with their father, and before they could realize and stop her, she reached into her pocket and tossed a lit, open metal lighter. The rickety cabin went up in flames, with Harper and Dustin inside. Char turned to her creepily smiling husband, and they solemnly walked into the burning cabin together. The next morning, 2 hikers came across the charred remains of the cabin. One smashed down the door to search for survivors, but found nothing. He called the forest ranger to make a report. While he waited, he swore he spotted something through the thicket. A family. A mom, dad, son, and daughter. He called after them, but they didn't respond. They just went on their way, each with the same contented and creepy smiles. Thank you so much, Haven, for inspiring this, let's say, summer campfire story. Have you ever been visited by the dead? Do you have a story of someone coming back to visit you? Tell us about it at SomethingScary@Snarled.com. They say that opposites attract, kind of like good to evil. But 2 sides of one coin can never truly exist at the same time. At some point, one side or the other will prevail. Like in this story, inspired by an anonymous, devoted podcast veteran. The local church ran an all-girls summer school. There were only 2 reasons anyone ended up there. Either their parents thought it would be good for them to be closer to God, or they were a real troublemaker. Lucian was the latter. She was a mean older sister. She would torment her siblings endlessly, locking them in closets and telling them that ghosts were coming to get them in the night. Her parents begged her to stop, but Lucian wouldn't listen. One day, with no idea what left to do, her parents enrolled her in Bible camp with the Sisters of Peace and Eternity. "We will take care of her," the nuns promised her parents. "There is no child that we cannot help." But Lucian was not any child. She refused to go to chapel, she spat at the sisters, and when they insisted she go to confession, she ran into the woods and hid overnight. On her way back to camp the next morning, she saw another camper looking at some birds in a tree. "Hi, I am Fleur," she said. Fleur was as good as Lucian was not, but Lucian was desperate to have someone to talk to. Their friendship was an unexpected one, but quickly blossomed. Lucian tried to rope Fleur into all of her plots and schemes, but Fleur, being Fleur, she always politely declined. But when Lucian stole the keys from Sister Mary for what Lucian called a little game called Midnight Luck, she relented. It was just a game. It would be fun to sneak out of their cabins, and tonight was a full moon. A night that could be used for anything. The darkness inside will finally be let loose into the world for everyone to be cleansed, said Lucian as she explained the rules of the game to Fleur and the other girls in her bunk. Midnight Luck was a game similar to hide and seek. Everyone hides in different places around the camp while the seeker counts to 100. The game was adapted from an ancient legend of a Krampus-like demon who found villagers at night and dug his sharp talons into the shoulders of anyone who was out too late. But not just anyone. He was looking for sinners, people who had committed grave mistakes and had to be taught a lesson. But in this game, Lucian explained, the seeker will just make a stabbing gesture on the hider's shoulder. Later that night, the campers went to sleep as usual. At midnight, Lucian's face lit up as she caught Fleur's gaze from her bunk. It was time. The whole clique quietly crept out together. Once out of the cabin, Lucian declared that Fleur would go count in the attic above the chapel. The group gasped and murmured with opinions. The attic was forbidden and creepy from the stories they had heard, but no one was going to question Lucian. So, Fleur went to the attic and began to count. Everyone scattered to their hiding spots. "Sinners, good luck. Your best midnight luck," whispered Fleur. After a long time of playing, everyone had been pretend stabbed by Fleur. She was very good at this game. Everyone except Lucian. The girl spread out to help Fleur find her, turning the whole place upside down. But after a while, they gave up hope and agreed she was obviously a master at hiding and now was just messing with them. They crept back into their bunks and went to sleep. They woke up later to a sudden roll call shouting, "Roberts? Lucian Roberts?" No response. Silence. Where was she? After the whole camp searched for hours, Lucian's lifeless body was discovered in the attic, a large gaping hole in her shoulder region. Fleur was the only one that didn't seem surprised. She whispered under her breath, "They shouldn't be that surprised. She was a sinner. Her midnight luck just ran out." Thank you so much, Anonymous, for inspiring this Bible camp horror. Have you ever played the game Midnight Luck? What other terrifying games have you played with your friends? Did any of them end this poorly for one of you? Many old buildings have a tragic history. Usually, we're safe in the knowledge that the past is where that tragedy remains. But When that tragedy is so profound that it doesn't stay buried, it can reach out to us when we least expect it. Daisy had just started working as a stage manager at the historic St. James Theatre in Wellington, New Zealand. She'd had plenty of jobs before, but this job was the first real step in the career she'd always dreamed of. The theater was majestic, but a bit run down. It hadn't staged a new production since the 1920s. As she walked down the aisle, she ran her hand against the plush red velvet seats. The play would begin in a few weeks, but her excitement was tempered by an uneasy feeling that began to wash over her. First, it was the moldy prop closet. Then it was the lights that would inexplicably flicker on and off. But she rationalized her worries, writing them off to new job jitters. It wasn't long, though, before one of the older stagehands, Omar, told her that the St. James had a reputation for being haunted. Helga and Polly Byron were twins, Omar explained. Helga was the established older sister. Polly was her understudy, eager for the spotlight. But as soon as Polly's star started to shine, Helga became jealous. Eventually, Helga's jealousy grew so consuming that one night before a premiere, she fatally stabbed her younger sister as she walked on stage under the spotlights. Realizing what she'd done, Helga turned the knife on herself, and to this day, no one goes into their dressing room. Daisy rolled her eyes. She didn't have time for ghost stories. She had a play to put on. Daisy was a driving and motivating force for the crew. Her work ethic and technical know-how shined bright. This next production was sure to be a great success, and mainly thanks to her leadership behind the scenes. That night, Daisy stayed late to shut the theater down. She didn't mind, as it gave her more time to feel at home in the place. But in closing up, she passed Polly and Helga's dressing room. It was almost like it was calling to her, subtly marked off with tape, undisturbed for years. The product of superstitious theater people, she thought, as she impulsively tore the tape down and walked in. The room was totally bare. Adhered on one wall, a large, dusty mirror. She looked in the mirror and, out of the corner of her eye, she saw someone walk by behind her. She immediately backed out of the room and rushed back to the main stage. Daisy had seen enough and was eager to leave, when suddenly, the lights shut off, plunging the theater into darkness. Daisy groped the seats, struggling to find her way. She knew there were 2 exit signs and stumbled toward the closest one. But there, blocking her way, was a woman. Silhouetted in darkness, she approached slowly as Daisy turned towards the other exit. But another woman blocked her in that direction. They were pinning her in, slowly pushing her to the stage. Daisy climbed onto the stage to escape her pursuers, and to her surprise, the spotlight snapped on. And then she saw them, Helga and Polly Byron, wearing matching costumes of Lady Macbeth from the last production that had happened in this theater before it was shut down. They were identical twins, identical costumes, identical scars that lined their stab wounds, even down to the identical gleam in their eyes. Daisy turned to run upstage, but they were quicker. Helga unsheathed a knife and stabbed Daisy through the shoulder, pinning her down to the floor. As Daisy screamed and squirmed in vain to escape, Polly silently glided forward. She circled her, quizzically, puzzling over her part in this performance. Polly then gripped the stuck knife and dragged it down through Daisy's body with supernatural strength, nearly splitting her in 2. After Daisy stopped breathing, Helga and Polly stepped back to admire their work, bowed to the sounds of ghostly applause, and vanished. The next morning, Omar returned to the theater to find it still unlocked from the night before. When he saw the stage and what once was Daisy, he screamed. While waiting for the police, He saw the opened dressing room door and knew that they had to have done it. Of course, the police didn't believe him. So yet another production was canceled at the historic St. James Theater. Inside, the Byron sisters still wait, ready to perform with anyone who dares to shine brighter than them.
That's when I saw it. Not quite human, not quite real. And then it lunged at me. Blood was everywhere. Submitted by Anastasia. Hi, I'm Blair Bathory, and this is the Something Scary podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Whether this is your first time or you're one of the brave souls who join us every week. Sometimes, when the campfire dies and the cabins fall quiet, you hear footsteps where no one should be. The creak of a bridge swaying in the dark, whispers drifting through the trees. These are the things that don't show up on any map. At camp, some nights carry more than silence. They carry secrets you can't outrun. First, a face in the window, followed by, they don't leave footprints. Finally, in our last story, 3 bells, no escape. We know there are hundreds of podcasts out there, and the biggest influence on what people listen to is what their friends recommend. So please rate and review or comment on our podcast on both Spotify and YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and let us know what you think. Thank you so much. We are incredibly grateful for all of our listeners around the world. So, want to hear something scary? Dark trails, dark tales. Sometimes it's not what you hear at midnight that haunts you, but what you see. Like in this story inspired by Klaya. I didn't believe in ghosts before summer camp. I thought scary stories were just that, stories. But ever since that summer, I haven't been able to sleep through the night. I live in Arizona, and the camp was about 2 hours away. We all rode a bus into the mountains, 40 girls packed into sticky vinyl seats. I slept most of the way, but near the end, my best friend nudged me awake. "We're almost there," she whispered, but we weren't. Still 30 minutes out, but I was wide awake now. I asked her to tell me a scary story to kill time. She loved that kind of stuff too, and usually had a few creepy legends up her sleeve. She told me a couple standard ghost stories, but just as she started a new one, a woman at the front of the bus shouted, "We're here, girls!" I sighed. Story time was over. As we approached camp, the bus crossed a narrow bridge suspended over a dry, rocky creek bed. The trees around it were so dense, it felt like we were driving into a tunnel. I felt off. Like the air changed as soon as we crossed, cold, even though it was July. On the walk to our cabins, that bad feeling stuck with me. It was a nice enough place, forest cabins, a big mess hall. But something didn't sit right, like the trees were listening, waiting. During the tour, I leaned over to my friend and asked, "What was the story you were going to tell me?" "Not now," she whispered. "Later." The counselor leading the group stopped and turned. "Girls, please be quiet." So we shut up. But the weirdness didn't stop. I kept catching counselors glancing toward the woods when they thought no one was looking. And at night, I swear the trees creaked like they were breathing. The next day, we went hiking. Our group got lost for hours. Literally hours. The sun started to dip low, and we couldn't get a signal. It was like something swallowed us. Finally, a staff member found us and led us back just before dark. Back at camp, sweaty and exhausted, I turned to my friend. "Okay, you've got to tell me the story now." She shrugged. "I told you, before midnight." Why midnight? She just said, that's a part of it, and smiled in a way that made me feel uneasy. We stayed up late in our cabin. The counselor on night duty had already walked past once, so we whispered under our covers, waiting for midnight. She sat up and pulled the blanket around her, asking me if I remember that bridge. Of course I did. They call it Mona's Bridge. Years ago, a girl at this camp, Mona, was staying in cabin 6. She was quiet, weird, didn't fit in. Some of the other girls dared her to climb one of the beams in the dining hall during lights out, and she did it. I waited. She slipped, cracked her head open, died instantly. They tried to keep it quiet, but after that, things started happening. Screams in the woods, footsteps outside the cabin. The camp almost shut down. Wait, I said. She haunts the bridge? She lives under it, my friend whispered. She only shows herself at midnight. But here's the thing. She doesn't just appear. She's invited. Invited? She nodded slowly. The curse doesn't activate unless someone hears her story before midnight. That's the rule. I laughed, uneasy. So you cursed me. She only comes if you look for her. That wasn't comforting. I lay there in silence, watching the glowing red digits of the cabin clock tick closer to 12. The wind howled outside. The floorboards creaked like footsteps. I'm not going to the window, I muttered. My friend didn't answer. She had already rolled over. 11:59. Silence. No screams. No footsteps. Midnight. Nothing. Relieved, I exhaled and turned toward her bunk to make a joke. Maybe something about how she wasn't a great storyteller after all. But she was gone. I froze. Her blanket was rumpled, empty. The bunk creaked slightly, like someone had just left it. I turned back toward the window, and there she was. But not Mona, my friend, standing outside the window, pale, expressionless, just staring in. She was soaking wet even though it hadn't rained. I blinked. What? Then I noticed something behind her, a second figure, just behind her shoulder. Almost invisible except for the eyes, dark, hollow sockets. And that smile, like the mouth had been split too wide to ever close. The figure lifted its hand, placed it on my friend's shoulder, and she smiled. That was the last thing I saw before I screamed. When I opened my eyes again, it was morning. Sunlight poured into the cabin. The other girls were stirring, stretching, groaning. I sat up, heart racing. My friend was back in her bunk, dry, normal, smiling like nothing had happened. What? She asked. You were outside last night. She blinked. No, I wasn't. I waited for her to laugh, to say I got pranked, to explain how she got back inside without making a sound. But she didn't. That day, she acted completely normal, like the night before never happened. But she was different. She didn't eat much, barely spoke. Her voice sounded flatter. And when we crossed back over the bridge to leave camp, I caught her looking down, smiling. We haven't talked since that summer. Not really. She moved away, or at least that's what her parents told mine. Her social media accounts went dead. She never answered my messages. Sometimes I wonder if she was ever on that bus at all. And sometimes I dream of the bridge. I see her standing on it, holding hands with something I can't see, waiting. Last night, I got a text from an unknown number. No message, just a photo. It was my face, staring in through a window. But I was home, alone. And I wasn't near any windows when it was taken. Are you someone who is scared of the dark? What's the craziest thing you've seen or experienced that makes you so terrified of it? We love hearing from you, so tell us your story by sending us an email at somethingscary@snarled.com. Sometimes the thing outside your tent isn't trying to scare you. It's waiting for someone to let it in. Like in this story inspired by Dahlia. When I agreed to go to my cousin Avery's summer camp in the Rockies, I thought I'd be bored out of my mind or eaten alive by mosquitoes. Probably both. Avery was the kind of person who could harmonize during camp songs and tie perfect square knots. Me? I was more of a please don't make me sing type. But a week into the mountains without Wi-Fi sounded pretty great compared to sitting at home with my two annoying little brothers. We got assigned to tent number 5, Avery, me, and 4 other girls. The tents weren't really tents, more like heavy canvas stretched over wooden platforms, each with 6 creaky cots and a zipper that never quite zipped all the way. The nights were cold fast, and the dark out there wasn't the normal kind of dark. It was the kind that feels like it's watching you, pressing on the tent walls like it wanted in. The first few days were a blur of canoeing, awkward group activities, and crafting friendship bracelets that mostly ended in a tangled mess. The other girls in our tents were okay. Emily was soft-spoken and polite. Jess told ghost stories so loud I was pretty sure the counselors heard her. Shannon and Elise stuck together like glue, mostly ignoring the rest of us. But the second to last night, that's when everything changed. We were dozing off after lights out when sand suddenly hit the side of our tent like a hailstorm. Laughter, then a zipper ripped open, and a rubber horse head lunged in, snorting like it was alive. Screams. Someone threw a shoe. Jocelyn from cabin number 2, one of the older girls, collapsed laughing. Her friends were outside, barely keeping it together. I thought it was hilarious. The other girls didn't. "You're gonna make someone pee their pants," Avery hissed, clutching her sleeping bag like it was a shield. Jocelyn shrugged. Camp tradition. Then she vanished back into the trees, still giggling. That's when we heard it. Flip, flip, flip. Flip-flops, slapping against bare heels, slowly, lazily, circling the tent. At first, we thought they were coming back for round 2, but there were no whispers, no giggles, just that steady, plodding rhythm. Flip, flip. After 10 minutes, Avery yelled, "Okay, we get it. Go to bed." No, answer. The footsteps didn't stop. Eventually, the sound faded into the night. Tree frogs, wind, distant branches creaking. I must have drifted off because the next time I opened my eyes, the tent was pitch black. Flip, flip. The footsteps were still there. I had to pee badly. I almost unzipped the tent, but the moment I reached for the zipper, the sound paused, right outside the flap. I froze, held my breath. The footsteps resumed. I curled into my sleeping bag and waited for morning. At breakfast, we brought it up. Jocelyn raised an eyebrow. I went to bed. "You think I'm gonna be out there for hours in flip-flops?" We asked around. Same reaction. "Nope. I didn't hear anything. You're making it up." The counselors didn't even pretend to care. But every girl in tent number 5 had heard it. All 6 of us. The same sound. All night. Later that day, something else weird happened. During free time, I noticed Bailey, the quiet girl from cabin number 4, standing alone behind the mess tent. No shoes. Her feet were caked in red dust. She was just staring into the trees, like she was listening for something. I swear, I wanted to say something, but I didn't, because I figured it was just her way of dealing with camp or whatever. Or maybe she was just weird. Anyway, she didn't show up for the testimony fire that night. The counselors made a few hush calls for her. 15 minutes later, 2 leaders came back from the woods, flanking Bailey like bodyguards. She looked dazed, still barefoot. Sister Kay raised her hand. "Nothing to worry about." Bailey was sleepwalking. "She's safe, girls." But she didn't look safe. She looked emptied out. That was our last night. We zipped the temp up tight and turned our flashlight, telling dumb jokes to stay calm. But none of us could ignore the tension crawling up our spines. Then, just after 1 a.m., we heard it again. Flip, flip. This time, there were 2 sets of footsteps, one heavy, one lighter, out of sync, but circling, always circling. Jess whispered, "What if it's Bailey?" No, Avery said, it's not. The sound stopped right outside the flap. Then we heard a voice, soft, crooked.
Can I come in now?
It sounded like Bailey, but it wasn't. Too calm, too empty. No one moved. Another voice, lower, hoarser, spoke behind it.
She already said yes.
Philip. The footsteps resumed, only now they didn't go around the tent. They walked away, into the woods. We left camp early, no big send-off, just sleepy girls and duffel bags and counselors who wouldn't need our eyes. On the bus, Avery whispered, "What do you think they wanted?" I didn't answer. I thought that would be the end of it, until last night. I was home, in bed. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Then I heard it. Flip. Outside my window, I held still. I closed my eyes. It must have been my imagination. But this morning, when I stepped onto my bedroom rug, it was damp. By the door, a single faint wet footprint, facing inwardly. Not mine either. I don't know why I'm telling you this. Maybe because I'm still embarrassed that once I peed in a lake on a Girl Scout trip and told no one, not even my best friend. Or maybe because I want someone to know. But Avery texted me last night, just one line. They don't leave footprints unless you say yes. Did you? If you ever hear the slap of flip-flops outside your tent, don't pretend you didn't. And whatever you do, don't say yes. What was scary more, the thing outside or the thought that someone already let it in? How long could you ignore the sound of footsteps, knowing they were getting closer to you? Have you had to deal with footsteps following you? Tell us your story by sending us an email at somethingscary@snarled.com. They say 3 bells are just an old camp legend, but when you're the only one who hears them, you better run. Like in this story written by Abby. The girls of Cabin 5 weren't supposed to be awake, but once the counselors left for night watch, they huddled together in their bunks, trading snacks and ghost stories. The soft glow of Amy's flashlight lit their circle like a secret fire. Rebecca sat curled at the edge of the group, arms wrapped around her knees. She didn't like scary stories, but saying so out loud felt like asking to be eaten alive by middle school girls. So she stayed quiet and pretended to laugh along, even as her stomach twisted into knots. Amy leaned in dramatically. Want to hear the story of the 3 bells? A few girls squealed with approval. Rebecca didn't. Many years ago, Amy began, there was a camp just like this one. And just down the road, there was a psychiatric institution, like super high security. Most of the time, things were chill, but sometimes patients would escape. Someone gasped. Amy smirked. The camp set up a warning system, the 3 bells. If one bell rings, that means a patient escaped, but they're harmless. Just stay near your counselor. If 2 bells ring, it means the patient might be violent. You're supposed to stay inside, lock the doors if you can. But if 3 bells ring, well, she paused, drawing it out. It means the patient is extremely dangerous. It means the kids need to be evacuated immediately. A cold hush fell over the group. Rebecca couldn't help it. She asked, "Has it ever happened? Like the 3 bells?" Amy gave a sly grin. They say it only happened once, but no one ever talks about it. Some say that night the bells rang, but no one got out. Just then the cabin door creaked open. The girls shrieked as their annoyed counselor appeared, hands on hips. "Enough! Lights out!" Grumbling, the girls retreated to their bunks. But Rebecca stared at the ceiling long after the others fell asleep, and she could hear in the darkness were the echoes of bells that hadn't yet rung. The next morning, the counselors announced a surprise overnight canoe trip across the bay. Everyone cheered. Everyone except Rebecca, who felt a quiet unease settle in her chest. They were heading away from camp, away from any bells, away from help. Still, she didn't want to ruin the mood. She packed her bag, slathered on bug spray, and tried to smile. As they walked the wooded trail toward the water, a sudden clang echoed in the distance. Rebecca froze. "Did you guys hear that?" she whispered. "Hear what?" Amy asked. "Like a bell." Amy raised an eyebrow. "Nope. Probably just your head." Rebecca swallowed her fear and kept walking, telling herself it was nothing, probably just a buoy, or maybe a camp bell from lunch. At the dock, they loaded the canoes and pushed off. The water was calm, the sun bright overhead. But just as they were halfway across the bay, 2 sharp bells rang out, louder, clearer than before. She whipped around. "That! Did no one hear that?" The other girls blinked at her. "I swear, 2 bells." "Maybe you've got, ear trauma," Sasha joked. Rebecca didn't laugh. She just kept paddling, eyes fixed on the distant shoreline. By the time they reached the other beach, she was shaking. She was sure the bells were real, but everyone acted like she was imagining them. Maybe she was. Maybe she was going nuts. That night, after dinner and marshmallows, the counselors set up tents near the woods. Amy tried to continue her ghost story, but Rebecca begged off. "I'm seriously tired," she said. "We'll get in trouble again." She wasn't tired. She just couldn't take any more stories about things that might be true. Eventually, sleep crept over her. Sometime past midnight, Rebecca's eyes snapped open. She had to pee. She groaned softly, reaching over to shake Sasha. "Sasha, come with me." No response. She tried Amy, then Nina. Nothing. The girls were asleep, breathing deep and steady, like they were sedated. Rebecca glanced around. Something about the air felt wrong. Heavier. Still, her bladder gave no choice. She unzipped the tent quietly and stepped into the woods. The night was dead silent. No crickets, no frogs, no wind. Every branch she stepped on sounded like a firecracker. She kept the flashlight low, too scared to see more than a few feet ahead. She was gone maybe 20 minutes. When she returned, the tents looked the same, except hers. The flap was open. She knew she had zipped it. She had double-checked. "Maybe Sasha got up," she muttered. She peeked in. The shadows looked too still. "Sasha?" she whispered. No answer. She knelt and shook her shoulder. The body shifted, limp. "Sasha, seriously, wake up." Her hand slipped. Sasha's head rolled away. Rebecca screamed, backing out of the tent so fast she tripped. Her breath caught in her throat. She sprinted to the counselor's tent, heart pounding so loud she thought it might shatter in her ribs. She ripped open the flap. Blood. It was everywhere. One counselor hung upside down from the tent frame, entrails trailing like streamers. Another was slumped in a sleeping bag, her eyes carved out. The others were twisted at odd angles, mouths frozen in silent screams. Rebecca clamped her hand over her mouth, gagging. Her ears began to ring. 1 bell. 2. 3. The sound echoed inside her skull, too loud, too real. Then she heard it. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, crunching through the pine needles behind her. She turned. No one. But the bells kept ringing. She ran. She didn't know where, just away, into the trees, into the dark. Her flashlight beam bounced wildly over roots and branches. She didn't stop until her legs gave out. She collapsed by the edge of the water, gasping. Across the bay, the lights of Camp Stillwater flickered faintly, and then she saw them. On the dock, a tall figure, thin, pale, wearing a counselor's uniform, but off, like it didn't quite fit right. The figure tilted its head, and even from a distance, Rebecca felt it see her. It raised one hand. From the trees behind her, clang, clang, clang. She turned just in time to see the reflection of a blade catch the moonlight. The next morning, the camp director arrived by boat to check on the overnight group. There were no screams, no sign of struggle, just empty tents, zipped shut, campers' belongings neatly packed, as if they had never been there at all. But that night, back at Camp Stillwater, Rebecca's bunk was still made, her bag still in the corner, her flashlight resting by her pillow. And sometime after lights out, one bell rang, then two, then three. What would you do if you were the only one who heard the warning? Would you speak up or stay quiet to fit in? This week's podcast stories were edited by Sarah Lukasiewicz, narration by Blair Bathory, audio edited and mixed by Fitz Harris, additional audio editing by Calvin Linderman, produced by Anna Villalobos, executive produced by Gail Gilman, music by Sapphire Sindalo and Calvin Linderman. If you have a story you'd like to submit, send me an email at somethingscary@snarled.com. Don't forget to watch the video version of Something Scary over at youtube.com/snarled. And if you'd like to support the show and everything we do at Snarled, join our Patreon at patreon.com/snarled.